Today's guest is someone who carried both legacy and expectation into the top level of professional sport.
One thing that I've always loved is sport.
Josh Beaumont is a rugby powerhouse. He's been a dominant presence at number 8 or at lock and spent more than a decade with Sale Sharks. When that injury hit, what did you learn from those moments in terms of resilience to get back?
Taking myself away from the environment, I learned pretty quickly was the best thing. I mean, I've got a load of regrets from my career. There's no way you've got no regrets in your career, even like the most successful sports people.
Josh racked up nearly 200 appearances and went on to captain the side. He won individual honours at the club and came within 1/4 of winning the Premiership title at Twickenham. He also represented England, following in the footsteps of his dad, Sir Bill Beaumont.
The best quote I've ever read: make sure you retire to something, not from something.
We actually met in the classroom where Josh was preparing for life off the field. In this chat, we'll explore Josh's journey, navigating legacy, pushing through physical limits and captaining at the very top level, and what comes next now the whistle is blown for the final time. Let's get into it. Josh, mate, nice to have you. We shared a classroom as adults, didn't we? Probably COVID time, maybe 2019-ish, I reckon. And I always remember you coming into the classroom straight from training, battered, bruised, but still with that energy to learn and that want to learn in the classroom. Be honest with me now, what was hardest? The sitting with a group of guys and girls on a Monday morning learning about finance and sport, or the cold weather sessions at Carrington?
I'd definitely say, no, that's a tough no. The cold weather sessions at Carrington still get me. But it was, that time it was so different to. I remember crutching up once because I had a really bad knee injury. And I think because I only ever did, we were 2 days every month, weren't we, sort of on site, and I could never do one of the days because of training, and the club just wouldn't release me. But so I did whatever I could to get to the next day or the day before. I remember I was like, had this knee injury coming up on crutches in a big cast. I remember sweating like profusely coming up these stairs to try and get into a class. But it was, that was just eye-opening for me doing that MBA with certain, the people on the course. I just used to love just sort of sitting, because I didn't have that experience that sort of yourself or other people on the course had, but I was just so intrigued by some of the stories. And I found that the most beneficial thing of that MBA. And it wasn't necessarily like the learning that we had to do that came with the studying. It was more just when we just opened up in discussion and just sort of you had people just firing in from everywhere, and that was what I found really interesting. Just getting to know what, we had quite a wide sort of spectrum of individuals. Some quite a few obviously from sporting backgrounds, but in terms of what people were doing then and there was really interesting. And I was just sort of super keen to get stuck in and I didn't have much to offer at times, but it was definitely interesting. Something I certainly enjoyed. I didn't really enjoy the studying element of it, but it was it was more just sort of picking up bits from people and. It was interesting, but it was some funny conversations that we had. Yeah,
and mate, the career that you've had in sport as well, you kind of underestimate what I think you can offer in that environment. And I guess the follow-on from that is, where did you feel more exposed, on the rugby pitch or stepping into a classroom?
Stepping into a classroom. I mean, I'd previously done sort of the studying side. I did my undergrad and went sort of the old school route into professional rugby, so it wasn't necessarily like the studying side, and I knew how to do all that sort of that's a bit of a game in itself, and like I knew how to sort of I know it sounds bad, but you know what to do to sort of get the grade that you want, for example. But it's more sort of being exposed to some of the questions that we got asked in open discussions. I know we touched on leadership stuff, which I could probably translate from the rugby side, but the different sort of on the syllabus, the different topics that we had to cover. I did find that I was a bit exposed at times, and I felt like I'm so out of my depth here because I don't know like anything. Like the people talking in business terms, and I still don't know that as well. Like I think I knew what a KPI was, but all the sort of abbreviations, I was just like quickly on Google, like what does that mean? But it was stuff like that I felt quite exposed. But at the same time, you're like, well, I'm a professional rugby player. I've for the last 6 years, all I've been doing is playing rugby, so I can offer a lot from my sort of background and my sort of career that I was in at the time, but I was there to learn. And once you sort of accept that, then you might say the odd stupid thing, but on the whole, people are quite interested in what you've got to say. And it was I really enjoyed that.
Awesome, mate. And I think that it's that willingness just to expose yourself and be vulnerable is where people learn and grow anyway, isn't it? So I think even just stepping into the classroom, it just shows how much character people like you've got, right?
Yeah, I think as well, because there was times in my career where I didn't do that sort of on the pitch, so I knew, and it was quite hard to sometimes almost train that whilst being in like a professional rugby environment day to day, because you're sort of to the same schedule. And I sort of had a leadership role anyway, but I was in that role, and that wasn't to me stepping out my comfort zone. Like, I was happy to talk to players, to sort of lead team meetings, but it was more, I suppose it was more dealing with uncertainty that I was struggling with at my career. And I found actually just take myself away from rugby and put myself in a new environment and try and get exposure that way, then that will help me sort of on the pitch. And like around, especially in the international, I'm sure we'll go on to discuss a bit, in the international setup, that's where I was probably lacking.
Right.
So I found actually do something completely different, train your body to deal with uncertainties. You have to think on the spot quickly in other settings, and that really helped my rugby career, and I think it did. Awesome,
mate. Well, let's roll back a little bit, because your story probably starts a lot with expectation, right? And also with an incredible opportunity, I guess. And, you've carried a surname that means a lot in rugby, a lot in sport, and probably kind of transcends sport in many ways as well. But you've carved out your own path as part of that. But, did you ever feel like there was a weight of expectation of something that you needed to carry forward with any of that?
Probably at times. So on reflection, yes, I think it was harder. I look back now, and it was a lot harder growing up, because I know it sounds really big, but when you're playing sort of schoolboy rugby, club rugby growing up, then you did feel that all the time. You had players talking about you, your surname, and so I think you're always aware of that. I mean, I had two older brothers as well, which helped, because they'd had the same thing, and almost I know certainly my oldest brother, it probably put him off sort of pushing himself forward in rugby as well, because he just, it does, you want to carve your own path out, and it is difficult. But when you get to sort of the elite environment, you quickly realise that you can't be there because you've surname. You're there because of your own ability. So, but yeah, growing up, day to day, you'd never really feel it. We were quite close to the family, got a close group of friends and family friends. So everything was just sort of quite normal. But you go to situations like I'd go and watch England play at Twickenham, and you suddenly realise actually this isn't normal, when you see your dad being stopped every sort of second to get autographs and pictures, and it is different. And you realise actually, as I said, like early on, you don't realise actually what he achieved in the game. Yeah. But he, like, to win, he was captain of England, captain of the British Lions. Even his sort of role as captain of a question of sport, which a lot of people recognise him for, rather than rugby, you realise actually you probably are in the spotlight a bit more. I don't think they ever put pressure on me. Both my parents never put pressure on me to go into professional rugby at all. I'll tell you what they did do. They saw that I had a talent, whether that be in rugby or different. And I was probably more into my cricket growing up, and I was probably not more talented, but showing more potential as a cricketer during my early teen years. But they were just keen, whatever it was in, they were aware that I was quite talented, so they just wanted to give me the opportunity and to not push me too hard, but just say you'll probably regret it if you don't keep pursuing that. So that's what they probably did do, rather than, they were really supportive parents. But they never sort of put any expectation of me to, play professional rugby because of the name.
And when was there ever a point where your kind of career got to a level where that was kind of just no longer existed in your mindset at all? Was that when you finally kind of made it through at Sale, do you think?
Yeah, I'd say, it's a difficult one, because you've always sort of, I said a joke, I always say a joke, my brothers with a son of, because that's what you always get. Yeah. Referencing, you just become accustomed to it, really. So even now, even towards the end of my career, you still there's always the odd article coming out that's comparing myself to my dad. So you just get aware of it. But when I realised actually I'm here because of my own talent, and is probably when I was at university and I got signed by Seattle, because I went to university to do what my mates were doing, to get a degree and then to get a job in the city or something. That's what all my mates are doing. It was only when I did a pre-season at Sale and they offered me a contract that I thought, well, actually they wouldn't be doing this because they wouldn't name. It's just a waste of money for them. So it was it's probably early on in my career, and I started playing more regularly, and I was very aware that this is here because of my talent and what I've done so far in the game.
Yeah, I mean, when you're at that level of performance, it has to be about that, right? But I think the fact that we're even talking about it now, within sort of 5 minutes of starting a podcast, clearly that name still carries weight, maybe not in your head, but certainly within the world of rugby and sport and beyond that, right? Yeah,
and it does, and it becomes so normal as well. And it's actually quite... I remember when I was in England camp as well, but you look at like George Ford, his dad played, he was an ex-teammate of mine for a few years, Owen Farrell. You actually, when you chat to these guys, you realise you just get used to it. And if we have a laugh now, it's called the Nepo babies, of course. Even though George and probably Owen are probably, maybe not Owen, but probably the bigger names than the dads at the moment. But it's a bit of a running joke that we still have. I think, was it Thingy Bieber coined the term recently, Nepo baby, but I would have quite liked that to have known that earlier in my career. I could have made a joke about it, but it was. But it almost just became normal. I've always grown up with it, so you don't know any different, do you? So it's just you just get used to speaking about it and speaking to the media about it, and it wasn't. You just get used to it.
And so obviously you went on to carve your own path, right? When you think about, and you recently retired, I'm sure you've done loads of reflecting over the past few months. I saw your testimonial event, and I know that would have been a big moment to look back, right? But if you try and think about the big games, the big moments, the peak years for you within your playing career, what is it that stands out for you?
I think early on in my career, it felt like I was just sort of playing rugby for what it was. I didn't have too many. It was almost like the peak years of my career was at the start of my career, and I think actually injury has played a big part in that. Before I got any of my major injuries, but you don't overthink things, and it's like anything that I just went out there, played rugby, had a few of my good mates playing with me, and it was just simple as that. And didn't overthink, honestly, too much of it. Actually on the pitch, I just played what's in front of me, and then I think everything, like you've thrown a couple of injuries, and then you get involved in international setup selections, and then suddenly you've got so many different things in your mind. And actually, when I strip it all back and just think, actually, when I play my best rugby, it's when I've just sort of either not had as much of the consequences, or I've just been given the freedom just to play my own game. And that's probably when, reflection, that's when I was at my best.
What sort of ingredients do you think, other than what you just described there in terms of having that just go out and play attitude, what are the ingredients that you think make up some of those moments of sort of peak or high performance when you're on the pitch?
In terms of for myself or coaching or any of that side, I think myself just going the mindset of, I think maybe proving myself. I know we're going back to, it just hasn't really played a factor in my career. It was proving that I was, because I came a different route into the game. It was that I was sort of good enough, because I've not been, I didn't get selected for the Sale Academy growing up at the age of 18, because I was a bit of a late developer. I never got England under 20s. And I think actually deep down I used to see all these players who were, the way they carried themselves and being in these elite environments, and I never had any of that, and it used to wind me up a bit. So I always felt like I had a bit of a point to prove. But then I also have really high standards as well, and I just wanted each week to play to the highest standard. I wouldn't say I was a perfectionist, but I was just adamant that I'd do all I can just to maintain what I knew I was capable of.
It's funny, that word perfectionist, isn't it? 'Cause it actually comes up quite a lot in coaching, and I think if you have that perfectionist mindset, often it can hamstring you, right? Because it means that you want things to be so perfect that it stops you from even starting sometimes. Quite often performance is all about taking that first action and then refining and then going again and refining and accepting the fact that there isn't a perfect performance, right?
Yeah, I always felt I was quite a natural sort of rugby player as well, so I felt I could play the situation very well in games. I think that's when I was sort of captain, that was when I was at my strongest, is that I could read a game really well just because I played so much rugby, I'd watched so much rugby. And yeah, so actually, I know, it works a lot with sort of sports psychologists and the way that there's a lot of good to that, into going into games and visualising. But I think if you over-visualise and something doesn't happen that you wanted to, then it can, like I say, it can really set you back and set your performance back because you think, oh, I've not, that's not gone right in the first. I might have, if you're a kicker, you might have missed your first touch or sort of something like that, and it can really play in your mind. Where if you just play what's in front of you and see that as your main strength, and it sort of takes away from that sort of perfectionist mindset, is that everything's got to go to, because I've gone through it in my head already. But I never really had that too much. You always like to, we towards the end of my career, working with Alex Sanderson at Sailor, there's a lot about first actions, and I think that does help as well. So but if I overthought things, then I just find myself, the game would just go. Yeah. And even in training, like if you just overthink everything, which I'm guilty of doing, but if I knew when I was taking that too far, it'd get to half time and I'd go, wow, I've done absolutely nothing there because I've just been thinking about other things. Yeah, and I think just elevating that level of awareness is the first step, right? So being aware of what you are doing and then being able to intervene or act and change is the key part of it. You mentioned there something about, you always felt as though you were a natural rugby player, right? I had a guy in that seat last week who's an ultramarathoner, and we spoke about 3 elements of kind of pushing performance in endurance sport, at least. There was talent, hard work, and willingness to suffer. Do those 3 buckets kind of, how would you assess those 3 buckets in terms of the world that you've operated in rugby? Talent, hard work, willingness to suffer. Does that resonate? It does, yeah. I've seen so many talented rugby players, like unbelievable talents, like growing up, but if you don't have the other 2, it might differ in terms of, like, if you look at percentages of ultra compared to certain sports. So I always look at rowing as one, because university, I went to Durham University, has a big rowing. I used to watch them, and they probably were more shifted towards the hard working and just willing to suffer, because actually you need a bit of technique. But I'd say rugby still. I always split it sort of what makes you elite in especially in rugby. Is it mental or physical, and the percentage? And we always open it up actually at the start of the season. I still think it's about 75-25 or 70-30 on the mental side rather than the physical or talent. Yeah. Because physical and talent is sort of similar. I'd class that in rugby in a similar bracket. But yeah, I'd say the willingness to work hard, and then obviously rugby's such a physical sport. If you struggle to deal with sort of the suffering, more physical suffering in terms of putting yourself through it, the ringer each day or each game, then. But yeah, I'd say it does resonate with me, those 3 sort of elements. But I'd probably just strip it back from rugby and say actually the mental side is so much more important than the physical side and the talent. Yeah. Something that you also clearly leaned or carried forward on the field is the fact that you weren't just a player, right? You were the captain of Sale for many years, and you led yourself and other high performers through some seriously big moments, right? It must be a different feeling to have played again alongside people and then have to lead them as well. How did you find that? How do you find balancing that relationship with your peers? I found it really easy at the start. And then, because I had some players around me, I did it for half a season. Our captain at the time was a guy called Dan Braid, who was a back row forward, All Black, played probably only 8 tests for the All Blacks, but in a different era he would have played 60 or 70, but he was behind Richie McCaw for the All Blacks. He's in the same position.
Yeah.
And he was the captain at the time. He got injured throughout the season, but I saw him as a bit of a mentor. And I learned a lot about him in terms of the way he spoke, the way he carried himself. And actually, when I stepped into his position halfway through a season, we already had the team's already in sync. You know, we had Danny Cipriani at 10, you know, really talented guy, but also it was, you know, the attack in his backline was down to him, so he didn't really have to worry about anything else. And then, so I had a sort of a good team around me, and then I took over full-time captaincy the following year, and we made a few changes, a few people left, and I found that so difficult because I tried to take too much on myself and ended up doing too much, trying to do everything. And, you know, on reflection, I found it a really tough period, but it was probably, for what I've gone into and towards the end of my career, I reflected and actually at the time I sort of really didn't enjoy that because the team wasn't going well and it was playing on my mind so much and it was affecting my performance. But actually I learned so much from what I did wrong in that period that will help me go now. And I almost wish I had the opportunity at Sale to have captained towards, I did it on a few occasions, but to have captained towards the end of my career because I'd learned so much more. I was quite young, I was 24 at the time.
Wow.
And which was young.
It's a lot for a young guy.
When things don't start going right, you've got lads in your team who are seasoned internationals. And I probably should have asked them to help out a bit more, but for some reason I thought it would naturally happen, and when it wasn't happening for those guys. But later on in my career, I might have realised actually where they were in their career and why they might have not sort of been willing to help out a bit more and to offer a voice. But
so you were 24 when you got asked to captain Sale. What did the club see in you to offer you that position at such a young age?
I think they probably saw the leadership on the pitch, and I never went away from that. So I always felt my strongest suit was what I did on the pitch in terms of I was playing well, so obviously that leadership sort of style of leading from the front and everyone for like the typical sort of leader follower sort of trait. You need an element of that in on the pitch in sport, I still feel. And I had that, and then I actually got injured towards the end of that year. I was captain for the halfway through the season. So it probably took me a while to get back up and running the following year. So I didn't feel like I had that because I was still finding my form again. But I think probably the club probably saw maybe the way I carried myself actually on the pitch, but off the pitch as well. I was quite diligent. And then obviously read the game well, made good decisions on the pitch. They probably had a lot of trust in me that I was the right person for the job and could probably see a bit of a long-term future for me to be captain, but it didn't work out like that.
And you know, if you go back to that dynamic with regards to you being 24 years old, one of the lads, and also leading the team, was that a challenge for you to integrate yourself in terms of I want to be part of this group, but equally I've got a leadership role to play here?
Yeah, and I probably wasn't good at calling out. I knew, at that age I probably wasn't good at calling out standards that didn't meet my own standards,
right.
And I knew that. You know, there was, in terms of people not working hard enough, I probably wasn't good enough. You see someone like Owen Farrell who's done that from the age of 18, but I probably didn't do that enough in that role, and I felt I didn't have the support around me and we were struggling as a team as well at that time. So, that on reflection, and now I look at sort of we've got like senior leadership groups at the club from the playing side. We have done for the last 3 or 4 years, and I would have benefited hugely from that, but. At the time, it's just sort of your traditional, you're the captain. Right. Everything's on your shoulders. You know, you're organising, you're thinking about, when's our next team social? Like, you're thinking about the external factors that make things a good team and what do the lads need more of. And it was, and now I look at the last few years of my career, I was one of those senior leaders, but not the captain. And I just remember looking at the captain going, I wish I'd had this when I was a player.
I bet,
Yeah, but I suppose that's just the way that sport is. We're probably I don't think we're the most professional clubs when I was early on in my career. And I think that suited me because I come from the university environment where I wasn't professional at all. So that's probably what freed me up a bit to play well earlier on in my career. And then, towards the end, we're changing the director of rugby, Alex Sanderson. he looks into every aspect of the performance, and he's huge on sort of the psychology side, the mental skills that you need to perform at the elite level. And I learned a lot in that period, but it would have helped me a lot early on in my career.
Do you mind if we unpack that a little bit? So in terms of those mental models, mindset, interventions, what is there anything that stood out for you in terms of practical stuff that you onboarded and were then able to apply?
In terms of actually on the pitch, in terms of my own performance, just sort of
in general, I'd imagine that there's an element of on-pitch performance, whether it's decision making or high stress environments where you have to, respond or react in a certain way. And equally off the pitch, I'd imagine that level of awareness is going to help you in other things as well.
Yeah, we in terms of going back to on the pitch stuff, we looked a lot at this in the last few years of my time at Sale, because we'd identify moments, and you can actually see it from visuals at times. I saw it the weekend with Sale, got 65 points put on him, but at the time as a player you might not realise. But I remember we did some like almost workshops as players. We did a lot with Alex, and he was really big in this, but about dealing in that moment of high pressure situations, how do you get yourself out of that sort of state of flux where your brain's scrambling, and you've got 20,000 people screaming at you away at Leicester. How do you maintain control in those high pressure situations? And we'd talked a lot about mechanisms to do that, but we just opened up to the floor actually. I remember in meetings, and one player, one of my good teammates, he was like, my coping mechanism, you might not have seen it, but I'll tie my shoelace. He doesn't need to tie a shoelace, but we talked a lot about that. So in terms of what we can do,
almost like a reset moment.
But then how we do that as an individual, but then how we do that as a team. So there's loads of stuff we looked at on field in terms of stop these spiralling moments, and how do we maintain and keep on top in when we're going well, and that next job mentality, all that sort of stuff, and who says what and when, or if anything needs to be said. Because often you say too much, don't you? Actually, does anything need to be said, or do you just in the flow and do you just let it go? And I suppose off pitch as well, I'd worked with a couple of sports psychologists when I went into England as well, and did stuff like a bit of feedback stuff. I remember doing the stop start continue stuff, and I did that actually, but again, it's like you're asking your peers to do it, and it's like, have they put as much thought into it? And I got some good feedback of that, which helped me, but a lot of it would be just about how are you preparing to go into sort of that cauldron of high pressure situations. And actually part of being a professional rugby player, it's the on pitch, but there's so much off pitch to make sure that you're prepared to sort of, when you step onto that pitch, is that you'll find that flow as quickly as possible. So you take out all the external noise and pressure, and that when you go on, it's quite simple, and that you just do, you're not having to worry about sort of moves that might be cool because you've done all your prep. I know it sounds so basic, but there's still players that you're just looking and going, you have no idea what you're going to do in this next bit of game. But that's the other side of professionalism. That just helps. It's
Sometimes the most sophisticated ingredient to performance is keeping it simple, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's so much noise out there. There's so much information available to us all. It's sometimes you fall into that trap of overloading and then procrastinating or just doing nothing as a result of it. So simplicity is a massive part of it, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, especially when you've got 50 guys in a squad, 50 players in a squad, and you sometimes you just need to keep it as simple as possible, because you got, some might not even speak the same language. You know what I mean? It's like how do we keep it as simple to get results, rather than just the more you overthink things and do more stuff, or do extra training sessions, or doing extra team meetings, like, is this actually helping? Because lads have just lost concentration. And actually, they're probably better just simplifying everything.
Yeah. Listen, you had setbacks as well, right? Injury is a big feature, not just of rugby, but of being an athlete, I guess, at the level that you've performed at. When that kind of hits, when that injury hits, what kept you moving forward in those moments, and what did you learn from those moments in terms of resilience to get back?
Taking myself away from the environment, I learned pretty quickly was the best thing. Like, I see lads now who've got long-term injuries, because I'm still based at Carrington, or even like in the last couple of years when I had knocks, and I see injured players with long-term injuries, and they're there at 7 a.m, and they don't leave till 3 in the afternoon. And I think that deep down they think that they're doing the right thing. But I just look and go, no. Like, I struggled, mentally I struggled being in the environment, because I was around my mates. They'd all go out onto the training pitch, and suddenly you're left in the gym and you just, staring at four walls. You're trying your best to do. And the early stage of long injuries, there's not much you can do, but you'd be sat in team meetings and they'd be talking about the game ahead of the weekend, which you're not part of. And I used to really struggle with that. And luckily I had a few quite long-term injuries, so I quickly realised what worked. So actually I was in and out really quickly, got my stuff done, and then had found myself distractions to do. So luckily when I had that MBA to do, when I was ruptured my patella tendon, that was another distraction. And I'd always make sure I had something going on away from rugby. I think that was an important part of performance, and my performance anyway, is to make sure that I wasn't just fully consumed by the sport. That might work for other people, but for me, I needed distractions away from the game to not overthink things. And I think because of that, a bit going for what we've already spoke about, my background was heavily dominated, and you're surrounded by rugby. And even still, I don't mind it, but you go home now and you still having your Sunday dinner, and rugby's the main topic of conversation. So you grow up around it. At times I felt it was good to distance myself from that, just to give myself a mental break, especially when you're injured, because all you want to do is to be out there playing. And when you don't have that, it just used to really wear on me to be surrounded by it all the time. So having enough distractions. And I often say to players now, actually, there's a lot of evidence and a lot of studies, because part of the MBA I looked into that, was actually if you have something going on outside of rugby or outside any sport you're doing, there's evidence there to say that your on-field performance will increase.
I think a lot of that comes down to identity as well, doesn't it? Right? I guess in those moments where you were forced out of the game through injury, did you ever start to wonder, who is Josh without, like, who am I? Like go deep and start thinking about who am I as an individual without this sport? Has that ever been
definitely? You lose that hugely, I think, when you're injured, because you go from one moment to, it's almost like it's a different job. I saw it as like your job was when you don't get that end of the week sort of, you're not on the pitch, so you're technically not really. I never saw I'm not doing what I'm paid for. I'm just injured, and you do really question that. You go, well, what? I'm just you're just in like a state of just nothingness almost, because like you're not seeing any results really. And I suppose that's when you're talking about what resilience, it's like, well, that's when you really have to set yourself that long-term goal. Is like, right, I'm going to get back onto the pitch, I'll get that back, but for now, and you've got to understand quickly that you might lose your identity, but the end goal is that identity might come back at that point. And I think, in hindsight, it definitely helped me for transitioning to experience that on a few occasions, so that you know what's coming. It's like I get asked now when I still have to go to games, and people are like, "Oh, does it feel really weird that you're to come to the stadium and watch Sale play?" I go, "Well, not really. I had 3 full seasons out where I still had to go to Sale games and not play. So actually, this doesn't feel any different to me." And I think a lot of players will struggle with that in any sport. But for me, because I'd already experienced that, I knew the sort of feelings that you'd get, and I was aware of that. So that's helped me now when I know I'm not going to get that the weekend. And I think it's just sort of normal for me now. I don't really miss it. I understand that points over the next year or 2 years or 3 years, I will get points where I want that back. And at least when you're injured, you know that you might get there. But now I know that I'm retired, I won't get that back, so you got to find it in other ways, basically.
It's mad, isn't it? I think there's athletes. I mean, I've never been an athlete at your level, but I've known a few, and I think use of language is really important, isn't it? I think there's a difference between framing it as a transition and framing it as a retirement as well. But you kind of use both terms there. It's almost like you.
The best quote I've ever read, I think it was an Australian player called Stephen Moore, who's a hooker, and he went. He was like, make sure you retire to something, not from something as a professional. And that always stuck with me because I was like, yeah, that's a good way of framing it, is that make sure, I think a lot of players always say I retired from rugby, and then that identity that you're talking about is that you're still a rugby player, where if you retire to something, then you sort of, it helps in losing that slightly. So
you said there a lot, a lot of players or athletes will struggle, if you like, with that transition. You, maybe not through design, helped yourself through being injured, I guess, with the transition. What do you think, what would your message be for anyone within elite sport who's transitioning into something new, or even in life in general, going through a big transition? How would you describe to them, that period, and what advice might you give someone who's going into a big change like that?
I'd say prepare yourself as well as possible in being, I know it's a comfortable and uncomfortable, but it's like that. It's how I'd say for any elite sports person, it's get yourself used to the unstructure.
Yeah. Because
you're so structured and I had 2 months off in the summer. First month was great on holiday. And suddenly after that, I thought it's the best thing for me. This so 2 months away with my family, away from rugby, and just on your own. But I think I needed to phase myself out of the structure probably a bit better than I did. I went from structure to absolutely nothing, which was great for the first 3 weeks, and then suddenly I got to a point where I was craving that structure again.
Yeah,
and I think that's it for my point. Is like you're used to sort of. I know you'll hear it a lot, but you get told what to eat, what time to be there, but that almost gives you it feeds into identity a bit as well. It's like, okay, well, I know what's ahead of me, where you take that away completely. So I'd say put yourself in situations, just train yourself or get yourself a job quickly that offers that structure, basically. So that's what I struggled with most. I think a lot of sports people will struggle with that, in that, you might still have the income coming in terms of what you do. You might be doing punditry, or you might be, you might have property investments. So you still got income, but it's that element of uncertainty and the unstructured nature of sort of retirement at an early age that'll bring.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you had a more of a softer transition by the sounds of it, but after such a long and successful career on the pitch, there must have been some sort of emotional reaction to that final game, or when you finally stepped into this transition. What was showing up for you in those moments, Josh?
It was really strange for me at the end, because I made the decision 6 months before, and I was ready for it as well, which is a really good thing. Is that I knew my body had the decision was made partly because the physical side, I maybe could have done it another year, but the knee specialist said, look, you'll have to have 2 knee replacements in 20 years' time. If you play another year, it'll be 10 years' time. If I wasn't particularly enjoying, I wasn't playing as much. I was still having to do travelling, young family, and I thought it felt like the right time. And I felt like a relief when I made that decision. So, but then the moments leading up to it were really strange. So we're going into knockout rugby, so we're in the semi-final, so you didn't know which week you were. There was no set date on when you're going to finish. And I wasn't actually playing, so we were at Welford Road. I was in the stand, semi-final of the Prem last year. The final whistle went, and I just looked at my wife and had the little one. I was like, that's it, my career's done. It was like I trained in the morning with a few of the older lads at Carrington, drove down to Welford Road, and it was like, honestly, it felt like such a weird... That moment itself, I just looked at her and went, I'm retired. And I had nothing, I wasn't on the pitch. It wasn't as though I was playing and I could throw everything into it. I was just stood or sat in a crowd. And I hadn't played a game for the previous 6 weeks, even though I was fit for selection. So I was just turning up to training, knowing that I wasn't playing, which was tough. and
What
quite
was the feeling
frustrating.
then? Was it relief? Was it loss? Was it pride?
It was. I did feel a bit emotional because suddenly you do get sort of like, oh, that's the last 10, 12 years. But I knew I couldn't have changed anything in those 6 weeks because we might have got to the final, might have won, but again, probably wasn't going to be playing. So that would have been a strange feeling in itself. And it would have felt great to have gone off on a high, but when you're not playing, it doesn't. It never feels the same. So yeah, it was sort of like semi-relief that it was done. I could really go into the next chapter of my life and my next challenge. But again, I've got a load of regrets, like from my career. And whenever you hear people say, "Oh, I've got no regrets," like nothing, I just like laugh at them. I was like, "There's no way that, like, even like the most successful sports people, I was like, there's no way you've got no regrets in your career." Like,
what's the main thing that kind of shows up for you then?
England. I never got that my international cap, and I suppose I was in the environment. I had Eddie Jones, and that was an interesting time. So I was in Eddie's first EPS squad.
Yeah.
And that was an eye-opening experience for me. I really struggled with that because I was the only player from Sale, and like I said earlier, I'd never been in that elite pathway like England in the 20s. Sale was a bit backward at the time. Coach, we weren't not like now where Alex Sanderson came from that Saracens environment. But I remember the first session, it was like, right, kick-off receipt. All the Saracens players like knew what to do, and everyone knew what to do. And I was just like, hang on, what's everyone? But because rugby is everyone's doing the same thing, is quite structured. Where Sale were way behind. So I remember feeling, oh, I'm a bit out of my comfort zone, but I just probably didn't handle myself. And again, like you look back and go, I would have done things a lot different. And dealing with Eddie had his ways, he had his methods of being a leader as a head coach. Again, I have regrets about the way I just accepted everything and just said, I just came back, even though I didn't agree with it. I just never, because I was so concerned that I finally got into the England squad. I didn't want to, I thought if I challenged him, I'd be out the door, and I might have been straight away. He might have just told me to leave, but I think he would have brought me back in. He would have. That's what he wanted. But at the time, the risk and reward, I just didn't do that. Even though I knew, and he was just doing that because he wanted to test me. And essentially, I look back and that's the one thing that I wish I'd dealt with that differently and really stood up for myself, but I didn't at the time because I was so concerned. And you speak to a lot of the England players in that, and a lot has come out in the press obviously since then, autobiographies. But everyone's in the same boat. But I thought it was just me at the start. But he was doing the same to everyone, and there probably was not many of the lads who they'll all say the same things. Like, I wish I'd sort of stood up to him earlier because that's what he wanted, and he probably would have respected that a lot more. And then you'd have gone, right, now I know what. Now I know your thoughts, and sort of don't agree or agree with it, but you probably would. That's what I wanted to see, and I just didn't show that really. So
does that play around in your head at all? Has it done since that period?
Maybe it has played around in my head. But what I see now is like if I'm in that, because I'll come across people in my next career, or you'll come across bosses, leaders, that actually is a way. You probably do need to challenge back where, as long as you do it not the right way, but in a way that you're not sort of just like going berserk with it. But I think if you did that event, you would have been out anyway. But yeah, it's that, I know what to do with certain types of leader and deal with that a lot better now. So I see it as a sort of a positive that it happened. I don't think it plays around in my head too much now because I hadn't been involved in the England setup for like the last 5 years of my career as a player. So but at the time I remember I was really struggling with sort of, I didn't really know what to do at the time.
Did you have anyone, or did you turn to anyone for some advice or mentorship? Obviously, your old man would have been. Yeah,
I'd speak to my old man about it, and then. But yeah, there's no one. I didn't really speak to anyone. I wish I'd spoken to players more. Right. So I wish I'd spoken to other lads who knew, and maybe if I had teammates in that camp with me. Like I look at Sale now, and I was like, lads, you're so well equipped to go into as young players into the international setup because the way that we train now, we're much more professional. And then also there's 8 of you in there, and I think that does make a difference. If I had a couple of teammates or even mates that I knew around, that I could lean on them and go, what do you think in this situation? or like, how do you think I should play this? What are you thinking? Then that would have helped me. But I've just felt quite isolated at the time.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and it was tough to. I found it was tough at the time to deal with because you want it so bad, and you know I was playing well at the time, but it just wasn't happening. So yeah, it was, and I don't know if the name played a factor in that. Is that Eddie tested me in a different way because he might have thought, I've had a, you've had it good all your life. Where actually I came the old school route into rugby, so I'd challenge that. And that's how I should have challenged him and said, well, it hasn't been that easy because I didn't get into Sale Academy at the age of 18. I missed out on England schoolboy selection, England and 20 selection. Had to, play national leagues, university rugby to really prove myself. So maybe that's what I should have gone back and challenged him with, and he probably would have appreciated that.
I mean, clearly you've had a really, really successful career, Josh, and on the pitch, and I'm sure you're going to flourish off the pitch as well. But it's fascinating how even when you reach those levels, there's always these elements that I would have done something differently, right?
Yeah, but I think that, I suppose it shifts as well. Like if you'd achieve, so I look at someone like George Ford now, and you speak to him, or like you speak to someone who's been on a Lions tour, and you go, okay, like if you look at it from what your motivations are to as a professional sportsman, is it money? Is it the achievements? Where look at someone like George Ford, he's probably got that, but there's always still something that he's probably the just scope is different from like where I was, or even like as an academy player, to where there's always, I'm sure Owen Farrell right now, who's just not come back to England, not made the England squad. I'm sure he's going through a similar thing where he's like, I've achieved so much in the game, 100 cap international, British Lion, won premierships, won European Cups, and like there'll be elements to him like, I've not won a World Cup. Like, how am I going to be seen? You know what I mean? But actually, like, you strip it back and go, crikey, I'd have given out anything to have got one cap, never mind like 100. But he's probably asking himself the same questions as I am or other people. It's like, I've never won a World Cup. I'll never be, perceived as a great at the game or something because I've never won that World Cup. Well, he probably will, but you know what I mean? It just changes, the scope changes.
It's new levels, new devils.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
You said a few things there about when you strip everything back, and you also mentioned that moment of retirement or realization that was your last game, even though you weren't participating, turning to your wife. You got a young family now. Does that family element now play a different role in your kind of career and your identity, given the fact that surely when you strip everything back, you realise that Like, how is that playing out for you now?
Definitely, yeah. I think that helped me massively in that last year because Charlie, my little boy, he was born in, he's like one last week, so he was born that last year. So I found actually you've got just different concerns, different worries. Actually, rugby is like, once you're there, that is your main job, but actually you've got something like, from a wider perspective, you've got, family to, actually, that for me, that's my... I've always been close as a family anyway growing up, but now sort of my own family, it's like, well, that's what's most important. Never mind sort of your job at times. It's that for me. So it does give you a wider perspective of certain things. Actually, if you got a sheet of paper and gave it to me at the age of 20 and go, that's what you're going to achieve in your career, then I would look at it and go, bloody hell, that'd be amazing. So that's the way I sometimes look at it as well. It's like there's regrets, there's things I wish I'd done differently, but on the whole, you've done what you've sort of, I've always wanted to be a professional rugby player. Loved it. Loved my time as a professional rugby player. 12-year career. I've still played for England, not the full cap, but a captain of England at Twickenham. There's some cool things that I've done, and it's just a chapter of your life, and actually see it as a positive and move on.
Yeah, and I think your transition is really interesting as well, Josh, because a lot of players who go through that transition, default position is to maybe go into the performance side of sport, right? Obviously, we connected first during the MBA, which I presume was part of your bigger picture thinking in terms of what does life look like after I've stepped off the pitch for the final time. And you've gone into a commercial role now at Sale, working with Louisa, who's one of my former colleagues as well, who's brilliant, by the way. What guided you down that path as opposed to going down that performance route? How did you conclude that was an option for you?
So the one thing that I love is sport. And you might challenge me on this because sort of you might have come out of it and you've gone into different, but I've always loved sport. It didn't have to be rugby, but that's my passion. I've always wanted to stay involved in the sports industry. Now I knew coaching, didn't mind coaching, did a bit sort of, you have to do a bit, got all my badges, whatever it is, but I knew, especially going into professional games, like if you think being a professional sportsman's uncertain, then being a professional coach is like 10 times as worse. I always said, you can never be sacked as a player. You got your contract, but as a coach, you go from one unstable career to an even more unstable career. So I was never that keen to sort of go down the coaching route, but I was always really keen on the sports industry, and I've always found sort of business of sport quite interesting, and that's why I explored it more in the MBA to get more of an understanding of it. But yeah, quickly now I'm realising, but I knew at the time, and doing that, just listening to yourself and others sort of in the group speak, that you can actually have that all on paper. I've got 2 degrees, whatever, but I don't have the practical experience, and that's what I'm sort of exploring now. So I think it's important now, I've realised that, to not put too much pressure on it, like to know that you go from actually knowing quite a lot about quite a niche sort of thing in professional rugby and real specific, areas of the performance side, to going into the commercial side, and not really knowing anything. So but until you get exposed on doing the practical stuff, then you're just starting out new. So don't put too much pressure on yourself to sort of go and like achieve so much, and just actually see this as like a big learning phase of my career, which, well, sorry, not my career, but my next, it is my career, but it's, so that's what I'm quite enjoying at the moment. And being at Sale, I thought, is this the best thing to do, to stay actually involved in the club? Because I've been there for 12 years, but actually the positive, it gives me quite a broad sort of spectrum of different areas I can go into on the other side, the commercial side, and learn off likes of Louise has been brilliant, who's been at Man United and been Liverpool, so it's really interesting.
And what at the beginning of this conversation, you spoke about walking into that classroom and feeling as though they're a little bit exposed, if you like. Fast forward to where you are now. Is there lots of lessons, I assume, that you have learned throughout your playing career that actually can be applied, right, in the commercial side of sport? What is it that's showing up for you in that sense, in terms of, hang on a minute, I can reference this, or there's a learned experience that I've had as a captain or a player in leadership? Have you started to pinpoint those learnings and start to think I can apply that, actually?
Definitely, I think longer term as well, the leadership side is that having to work with people. I think being in that team environment, especially when the stakes are quite high in high pressure situations, it gives you a lot of skills that you can that I've taken into sort of my next career, and actually can see moving forward as well, is that's where I can lean on those how to get the best out of people and how to communicate with people as well. And I think that's really important. I think you learn a lot that you don't quite realise at the time as a professional. And that's what I say to a lot of professional sports people as well. It's like a lot of skills, especially in team sports, like that's one of the strengths you can take from. And because the professional sport is really dynamic, really fast moving, it's like week to week, and you have to be proactive and be able to make decisions and just go with it, but have to take people along with you as well, and to motivate. And so that side of things is I can see being a real benefit. And then obviously I find it quite useful as well in terms of speaking to people about my experiences as well as a player, and like trying to match that to business as well is quite interesting.
Has anything caught you off guard? Yeah, have you thought, oh, wasn't expecting that?
I think probably there's stuff like, the one thing as well is speaking to some people, say if you're a potential like sponsor, you're quite interested in them, know nothing about rugby, and like, oh god, that's caught me off guard. It's like, right, so I've quickly got to learn a lot about the other side of because I think a lot of sort of sponsorship within rugby is, especially at club level, comes from people who are quite passionate about the game as well.
Yeah.
And like a lot of our sponsors have an interest in rugby or Sale Sharks, for example. So you've got automatically got that natural like, right, I can go to that as a talking point, or when you're pitching something to them or just trying to speak to them about business in general. But when you speak to someone who's not from a sporting background, you're saying like, all right, I need to be a bit more sort of well-rounded and understand a bit more about what's going on in the world, full stop, to really communicate properly with them. So that's probably caught me off guard a couple of times. It's like, right.
And obviously, you're going back to the legacy that your dad built. He went right to the top of the game when in terms of the administration side of rugby, right? Is he still the chair of World Rugby? Or
no, he was about 2 years ago, and then he can only do that for 2 terms. So after his 8 years, he went back to the RFU last year,
right,
as interim for 6 months. So yeah.
So is that the ambition that you have now, Josh, to move up the commercial ranks and be senior leader, chief executive? I'd say
that sort of role, senior leader, not necessarily within rugby as well.
Right.
Like I'm quite open to sort of sales great at the moment, and I've got a real passion for the club having been there, so it's a really good fit at the moment. But I don't want to. But yeah, to work myself up to that sort of level is where I want to get to. And yeah, I mean, that's why it's quite helpful in rugby, because there's an element of being in a senior position that you've got to have a good understanding of the performance side for the whole organisation to function. So that's where I see a strength actually staying in rugby. But I say I love all sport, and if I can pick up as much learning as you well know in over the next couple of years, then I can move off into different industries as well, maybe. So that's I probably at some point I'm fully aware that it'd be good to get out the environment maybe, but right now I'm very happy where I am.
Awesome, mate. Well, listen, I think that's a natural point just to say thank you for the conversation, mate, and I can't wait to see what happens next, buddy.
No, yeah, thanks, Dave.
Top man.
Cheers.
Cheers.